How long could you survive in the elements? What would you need? Could you fit it all in a bag and carry it around? And how practical would that be? Is the idea of indefinite support possible from a single bag system? An inch bag, also known as I'm never coming home bag, is this practical? And if so, should you have one? I have 5 talking points today. I'm going to introduce you to those points, and then I'll go into more detail individually. Number 1, how much stuff can you really carry? Number 2, how long is your gear and supplies going to last? Number 3, why would you want to live out in the elements indefinitely? Number 4, do you really think you could last weeks or months in the wild? And number 5, how many bag systems do you really need? Let's start with number 1. How much stuff can you really carry? For a lot of people, their upper limit is going to be like 20 to 30% of their body weight. And so roughly speaking, if you're 200 pounds, you might be able to get away with 50 pounds on your back for a while. But if you're not in good shape, it may be very difficult. The sustainable weight for you might be 20 to 30 pounds. So it really depends on how your gear is actually packed in your pack. You know, how far do you have to travel? Is it all uphill or is it downhill? All this matters, really. And so where are you going with all this stuff? You know, and the problem with having very heavy loads, and you're going to probably have to have a heavy load if you're going to have everything in this bag, everything that you're going to need to live, right? So these bags can be a lot heavier than 50 pounds. I've talked to a number of people over many years, and I've seen some bags that were just insane, just crazy numbers. I've seen one bag that was 90 pounds. No joke, 90 pounds was his inch bag. And I could barely even lift it, you know, comfortably. I just was like, I couldn't imagine putting that on my back and forcing myself to, like, you know, walk miles and miles with it. You know, I would certainly be injured eventually. And that's what I think a lot of people, they just forget about this part of injury. You can stress the body out to the point that you can injure it. This should be common knowledge, but a lot of people just write this off like, oh no, you know, it wouldn't happen to me. And the idea that you can get everything to fit in or on a pack system is also kind of fantasy. And that's why when you see a lot of people doing their loadout, they realize they can't get it all in there. And so they start strapping on additional bags and pouches. And then it gets to the point that they have carts or wagons they pull behind them. So you might have a 50 or 60 pound backpack and then 100 pounds of supplies that you're pulling along. Is that really practical? Number 2, how long is your gear and supplies going to last you? Like realistically? Because there's a lot of people I know that don't know how to fish or hunt or trap. They don't know anything. So whatever they're bringing, they're going to have to rely on that. I mean, how much food can you really bring with you that you can carry? And especially if we're just talking about within a backpack, what, 2 or 3 weeks is probably the most, because you have all this other gear and supplies, right? And so the people that I talk to that, you know, really have their, you know, stuff squared away, most of their inch bags, they're lucky to have 2 to 2.5 weeks. That's what I've noticed here locally. That's about all that they can carry. And this stuff is dried food, dried and dehydrated food. Some of it actually is freeze dried. And so they're doing their best to keep the weight at the minimum for everything. And that's all that they can put in there, 2 to 2.5 weeks. And so I'm here to ask you, how are you going to like survive indefinitely? Or when I hear stories of people say, yeah, weeks and weeks and weeks and months, maybe even a year or 2 minimum, I could survive out of this one single bag system. Like, seriously, like that doesn't remotely connect with reality. And so I think that for most people, we're talking about a week or two. The average American could probably last in a somewhat of an egress camping situation, maybe a week or two, and they would start to have some major problems after that. For those who are very seasoned outdoors people, 2 to 3, maybe even a month, they could probably get away with it. But afterwards, we're talking about true hardship. And I really do believe that there's only a very, very small minority of people that could extend out to several months. And why, this is number 3, why would you want to live out in the elements indefinitely? And this is where we kind of have 2 different camps of thinking, because there are people who really do believe that this bag could last in the rest of their life. Like it's kind of hard to understand that, but there are those people. And so, first off, why would you want to do that? Because typically most people have, well, almost every person has other options. And then you have another camp of people who say, well, this is not an indefinite bag. This is just a very long-term survival bag. And I would say that that probably accounts for like 80 to 90% of people that I talk to about inch bags. They're like, no, it's not meant to live, out of for the rest of your life, but it is supposed to last me maybe like at least several months. But when you ask them, do you have several months worth of food, or do you know how to procure additional food? And they would say, not really. So there's a lot of holes in people's systems. And that's what motivates me to do this video. And so what about friends and family? That's why I think that this whole inch bag system is not really fit for most people. Most people don't need an inch bag. I really do believe that a bug out bag is good enough for most people, because people don't have the skills, first off, to survive weeks and weeks and weeks or months and even, further. And most people have friends or family or a good neighbor or someone to go to. We have various churches or Red Cross here in the U.S. I mean, you have all kinds of shelters, all kinds of resources. And so this idea that you wouldn't even try to connect with someone that you know is kind of like really hard to understand. Now, maybe if you were running from the law, maybe if you're some type of criminal, I could understand that. But we're talking about law-abiding citizens here. Why wouldn't you go to a family member or a friend? I mean, most people have at least one friend that would open their doors for you. If you're in a really bad, serious situation, most people have at least one person to turn to. So it's really hard for me to really understand this as well. Like, why would you just want to go out in the woods and just camp there or try to survive for weeks, if not months, especially if you have kids and maybe a partner that it doesn't really know much about all this? So if you have a wife or a husband that has no clue about how to go out and do all this and survive for weeks or months, why would you put them out there, especially if you have little kids? And what about pets? What are you going to do with the pets? You're going to have all that pet food with you too? Like, what are you going to do with them? How are you going to care for them? So there's a lot of questions. And that leads me to number 4. Do you really think you could last weeks or months in the wild out of one bag system? And this here was more specific because it's talking about like what percent. Let's talk about that percent of the general population that could do this. That could actually just live out of their bag for. I think it would have to be months, And I really truly believe it's a very, very small minority of people. I would say probably 1% or less of the population could last months out of a bag system, one bag system, and ration food effectively and be able to procure additional calories and have an effective shelter system and to be robust enough in health to do all this. People really are used to not having to do these types of things. And so it's a real shock to the system. And I want to also question, is the objective in error? Is the objective in error? And I think it is. This whole idea that, you would either live out indefinitely in the woods, like why would you do that, of course? And the air about why wouldn't you search out for other resources? Why would you even want to be out there more than a few days? I can maybe understand camping out somewhere right after a disaster or personal crisis for a few days anywhere, maybe even up to a week. I could kind of see that. You could push the whole idea maybe even up to a couple of weeks, but I can't, in my mind, see many situations that would really kind of justify going more than a week or two without reaching out to other people for help. Why would you just want to stay out in the woods or in a desert or something for weeks and weeks and weeks or months and months and months? That doesn't make sense to me. And that's where the whole idea and the concept of an inch bag kind of breaks down to some degree. And so, yeah, for some people, an inch bag is not a bad idea, especially if you live in a very remote region of the world. It actually would make a lot of sense. But since I don't live in a very remote region of the world, or I just don't have the reasoning like I thought I did. So I don't have an inch bag anymore. I took it apart and I just made my bug out bag a little more robust. And that's kind of where I'm at with all this. And this leads to number 5. How many bag systems do you really need? We have our everyday carry bag, which makes sense. It has some essentials that we need every day. We have our get home bag. That makes sense in case we get stranded in our vehicle or at work. We have our bug out bag, which makes sense if we need to leave our house and go to a safe location. But what about the inch bag? I think that for probably like the vast majority, like 80 to 90% of people, there's really not true justification for an inch bag. That's just my opinion. And I'll be the first to say, let me just put this out there, the first to say that it's fun to build an inch bag, and that's why I used to have one. And I will be one of the first to say that it's probably better to have it and not need it than to need it and not have it. But let's just kind of really get down to a focus point here, and say, do we really need it? Most people really don't. And if you just need more capability, just enhance your bug out bag. And it was quite easy for me to do that. So the conclusion for me here is, in this recap, is that you can't carry everything you need in one bag to last you a long, long period of time, or an indefinite period of time. Your gear will eventually wear out and or break, and your perishables will run out. Also, why would you plan on indefinite survival when you have other options like staying at a friend's house or a family member's house? And what I found is a beefed up, comprehensive bug out bag may be a better idea or a substitute. Most people would be lucky to make it camping in the elements for a week or two, but not months or years. So it is best to simplify your bag systems. EDC for everyday carry essentials, get home bag for egress from work or stranded vehicle, and a bob for when leaving the house is essential to safety. Going from your home to a safe location is very important to have that capability. But an inch bag, while tempting, it may not be necessary or practical. Is an inch bag practical? And if so, should you have one? And in recap with this as well, I used to have one, but not anymore. I now have a more streamlined system and have advanced my bob to give me more capability. So is an inch bag for you? It could be. It very well could be. But you want to think it through. I want to close here with a quote from Albert Einstein. He said, "Any intelligent fool can make things bigger, more complex. It takes a touch of genius and a lot of courage to move in the opposite direction."